Welcome to MidDay Café. I'm Tyrelle Barnes.
And I'm Mike Gannotti. And this week, I'm very excited. We have a very cool topic. We're going to be talking about employee listening and people analytics strategies.
One of my favorites.
One of your favorites.
Yes.
But before we get into that, a couple of things. So we've been trying to iterate as we go through. And one of the things I know is I got feedback actually from Mrs. Gannotti.
Oh.
She said that she said, you know, because I use my hands a lot.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
There you go.
Yeah.
See,
we're demonstrative.
Two-hand,
yes.
Demonstrative. But she said, I have a tendency to come over with mine. She said, look, I was going to hit you. So she said, no more of this.
Oh. Okay.
So I'm going to try to avoid that. I'll keep my hands in this sphere.
In your own personal space.
My own personal space over here. But anything going on this week that you've had?
It's been a nice week. It's the first week of our new fiscal.
Yes, it is.
We actually got a quiet week. So no meetings, just time to like learn and do like focus work. And so kind of more of a recovery week, right? If you, in terms of like, you think about this in training. Mm-hmm. And so so recovery week at work and also a build week. I got in 150 miles this week.
Wow.
Like rides.
On the bike.
Yeah, on the bike. Some really good. The Roan Mountain ride. And then we did we call it the Ashe County Loop through West Jefferson. And then we did the Wednesday night ride, which is
But now you're down here officially now, right?
I'm back and forth.
Or you're still back and forth. Okay.
I'm just going to be back and forth. So
you're going to be looking for local rideage.
I don't know. I might keep riding in the mountains. It feels safer. I like to climb. I'm training for a big ride in Italy. So I'm going to ride some of the big Italian alpine climbs. Yes.
Oh.
Stelvio and some others. So I've got to keep riding in the mountains.
Okay. And I will agree. It does seem that it's safer because you have less traffic up there. And I do know, like, I live right over the lake, right on the other side. And it's, in the mornings, it is crazy. 4 lanes total.
Wow.
But a lot of times there's groups of bikers riding, and it's nonstop traffic. And there's the people on their phones, and
you can't text in the mountains. You can't text and drive, or you'll go off the road.
Yeah, so it's an added little safety measure. Yeah. And I actually my wife had, which is weird. We both have had people we knew in high school who were killed by a driver riding because
I say a prayer every time.
People are just not paying attention.
Yeah, it is definitely dangerous. Please share the road.
Yes. So that's cool. So you had that.
Yeah.
How
was your week?
I have had, this whole recovery week's been great. I've been getting work done, I actually did the little thing here on our screen.
That. Nice.
I added that and a little coffee. So kicked off some things. I worked on some demos in my demo environments, building some things out. And I've been dealing with our crazy psycho puppy.
Aww.
So she got spayed on Monday.
Yeah. That didn't calm her down a little bit?
So they told us she had to be a conehead dog for 2 weeks, right? And they said no, like it was Monday. So since 4th of July was the next day, rather than keep her overnight, which they normally do, they asked us to take her home. And they said she has to be totally calm. You can't let her jump, do any of this or that. And they gave us Trazodone.
Wow.
Right? To give her twice a day.
Tranquilizer, right?
A tranquilizer to keep her drugged up. And they gave us 2 weeks worth of Trazodone. Besides also...
Have you been taking it?
No, but I could have used some with her. So Trazodone, it didn't faze her in the least. It was like nothing. You'd think she'd be sore and hesitant. No, that dog wants to just go. So she's like, so to keep her more sedate, I've had to take a strategy, which actually was a two-edged sword. It actually worked out for the better for me. She needs to be exercised so she's tired, but in a controlled manner.
I can relate.
So I've been taking her for walks, and I think I told you the last 2 days, each day I've logged in 6.5 miles with her.
So she's taking you for walks.
She's taking me for walks, and yeah, so it's been good because I've been meaning to start, and it kind of was that jump start. But yeah, that dog is.
She's gonna grow out of it.
She will. She will. She's like our other. But that's been my week. So I've been a dog sitter for.
And demos.
And demos, yeah. Demos have been great. It's been good working on a lot. There's a lot of exciting things that we can, that are steadily getting lit up in the demo environments, and even just some of the stuff in our production environment that I like, where I'm able to access Copilot and some of those other pieces. And yeah, it's just amazing. But that's another talk. So this week, though, we want to talk about employee listening. And I know this is something that you touch on all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's also a subject, I think, near and dear to my heart as well, because we're talking about this week is Recovery Week.
Mm-hmm. Recovery Week.
And part of the impetus for something like Recovery Week is?
The employee signals and the feedback. From our we do our annual survey. They do it twice a year. It's called Employee Pulse.
Not to be confused with
Viva Pulse.
With Viva Pulse.
Something different, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But so Satya and Kathleen Hogan, our CHRO and our CEO, did a town hall yesterday, just talking about kind of the year and what's coming, and they shared feedback from the Employee Pulse survey.
Yeah.
And so we have a really high response rate to that survey because our leadership takes it really seriously and actions on that feedback. And so
that's key.
It's really important. And I think it's part of that feedback flywheel that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Where you're just it's part of our employee listening strategy. There's other components of it, like Viva Insights, for example. But the fact that they respond and they use that to kind of anchor in, changes and reorgs that we need, and to help kind of align with what people are wanting and feeling and what's working for the business is really important.
I think what's important to me, like I always, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, just this idea that it's kind of a loop, right? Because it's always circling back. There's the listening or measuring, right? And we do that both with insights. So you get all the objective data, like I'm logged in on my computer and I'm doing
that's passively collected.
Passive collection, right?
So you don't have to change anything. You're just going about your work, and it's collecting all of that data.
And it's a huge data set that really gives a look, but then it doesn't give the whole picture. But then they use Glint.
VivaGlimp now.
VivaGlimp, yes, VivaGlimp. We can say that now.
Which is our engagement survey, and that's
how we do our employee pulse
signals. Yeah. And they do some other things too. I mean, they actually do a random sample of 2,600 employees daily.
Yes, I get that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And so they can kind of keep another way of measuring over time, just to make sure that they can action on anything that comes up that's really like cause for concern, or things are changing dynamically in our world, and so just making sure that employees are okay and checking in regularly.
And I like how they call it Pulse. I mean, not to be confused with Viva Pulse, but because they're keeping a pulse on the org.
Right.
And I think it's that's something when I've talked with orgs about, it resonates because, again, it's that whole idea of measure, communicate, then they communicate what they've uncovered so that that they're not,
just ignoring it, or doing it for optics. Yeah, and then Kathleen actually shared some of the levers they were going to pull in order to respond appropriately and drive the business forward in a way that made sense based on.
So they act.
Yeah, so they act. And it's all about pairing those Viva Insights, passive data with the sentiment data that's self-reported from VivaGlimp, gives leadership an opportunity to pull the levers that they need to mitigate an issue, or to improve on something, or to even recognize a bright spot, and then, hey, how can we replicate that to other parts of the business? So,
and that's important, right? Because you don't want to just dwell on what's not working and what do we have to change, but really also on what is working, where are we seeing good things, and let's amplify that. But I love how it really is that kind of circle effect, measure, communicate, act, measure. It's just a constant iterative wheel, and
it's kind of like how we create software. We build the software, we test the software, we learn, and then we do that cycle. So it's kind of fun to think of it that way.
Same way.
Same approach.
And, for orgs too, it just makes good sense, because if your employees are happy and productive, it's not just that we're all happy and sitting around, yay. I mean, they're talking about, they do have to, and we're not going to get into particulars, but there's hard issues that our org has to wrestle with, just like everybody else in this economy, and things rapidly changing. But they do it in a manner that's, they're open and transparent.
Yes, that's so important. So that builds trust, because there is a lot of trust in our culture. And, Satya, our CEO, talks about how he focuses on our culture and our mission. Those are the two most important things that he and the senior leadership team meet regularly and discuss and present to the board. And they went into a lot of detail around the thought and guidance and the regular check-ins. And it was really helpful. So, encourage everyone to listen. If you didn't catch it, it's available.
So when we, talking about all that and how we're doing it, if you think about what are some examples and concretely, how can orgs be looking to implement something like this?
Well, they can start with a hypothesis they want to test, and then, do a pilot. So select a pilot of Viva Insights. You can't do a pilot of VivaGlimp, and I think most organizations have some way of doing an engagement survey. Ours just happens to be really, it's driven by AI, and so there's a lot of ways that you can also pair those things that come out of that employee engagement survey with the passive data collected from Viva Insights. So we have a lot of parallels there. But obviously, just making sure that you're checking in. When you get the employee engagement survey back, then what do? You want to respond in some way. You want to let people know what you heard.
What we've seen and heard,
And then what you're going to do about it. How you're going to take action. And so I think those are really important. Otherwise, a lot of people won't even respond to the survey. I mean, we're over-surveyed, right? Are you over-surveyed?
I get surveyed all the time for stuff.
For everything.
But for the corporate stuff, I do take the time. And for me, I'll tell you, one of the best examples that really hit home with me was in the beginning of COVID, when I still remember I had customers, I was covering teams at the time still, and I had a number of customers. I remember being on a call with it was a hospital, and they had no telemedicine presence, and they had just gotten word that the local schools were going to be shut down the following week. And I literally had physicians on the phone screaming, not screaming at me, but this, just they didn't know the severity of what thing. It was just that whole unknown and real fear, and they were like, we have to have things going. So myself and a bunch of other, all my colleagues, right? We were hamsters on a wheel going full bore, trying to get all these hospitals telemedicine using Teams, and how can they do this and still be compliant, but get the stuff out. And some of it was literally, we didn't have all the pieces in place. And so it was building the airplane as we flew, right?
We were really good at that.
We were putting on the blog, where this podcast goes on the blog, we literally were putting, use at your own risk sample code that other TSs like myself were coming up with and saying, hey, if you do this, and if you take Power App and do this, and beep, 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 it was like, just strange. It was MacGyvering it.
Thank you.
But the point is, they were monitoring. So at that time, it wasn't Viva Insights, but it was, what did we call it before
Workplace Analytics.
Workplace Analytics, which we had purchased. And they were monitoring the signals organizationally. And it wasn't just us. It was across the board, right? The whole company. Stuff was going on. And I'll never forget what made an impact. It was when they came out and said, we see what's happening. We know many of you are putting in much longer hours to meet our customers and help with this crisis and blah, blah, blah. And they were monitoring, then they communicated, and then they came out with actionable pieces per, our previous communications about this. We're providing you with extra time.
Oh, yeah, we got the wellness days.
Wellness days.
That was huge.
We are encouraging your managers to do the following. And then management, our immediate management, like my team paired up with another team, and our managers said they took 1 hour a week, midweek, to give a break. And they blocked it off and said, you cannot meet with customers or anybody. It's a team meeting. And they had us reading Dare to Lead and talking about it.
Oh, from Brene Brown?
Yeah. It was like a book club, though.
Brown. That's so
And it
nice.
was, going through and having these discussions because they said, look, we're going to pull you off that hamster on a wheel.
Yeah.
Give you time to go. But it was measure, communicate, and concrete action.
Right.
And that was huge.
Yeah. You're giving me an idea. I want to talk to our team about maybe doing a book club. That sounds fun.
Book clubs.
We used to do the happy hour thing, and that kind of phased out, right?
We also had done that. That got implemented.
It was fun at first.
Yeah.
It was fun for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
But a book club would be nice now.
And it's coming up with different things. But, it goes back to that whole, if they weren't measuring, instead of getting ahead of the curve, they'd have seen the curve, which many of our customers did and came to us, because then they were getting hit. Once people got into the whole work anywhere and hybrid and remote, they started losing employees and struggling because...
Really, that was a huge problem.
Right?
Attrition. And they weren't sure why.
Yeah.
So
that's a big piece of it. Some of the other stuff I think that... is very interesting is looking at, and it has become, unfortunately, such a loaded word because of politics. On all sides, people getting, but DE&I is important.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And how we're looking at that and how we're measuring it and the effect.
Well, we can measure inclusivity with Viva Insights. And it's hard to measure inclusivity. I mean, you have these plans and strategies in place, but actually measuring if they're taking, the right, having the right impact is really important, and you can do that. But the other thing is, Mike, and just politics aside, we know from our data and research, and we have known for a long time, that diverse teams are much higher performing, they're much more engaged, and their output is much better. And so we end up, you're much more profitable by having diverse teams. And we know that from our data. And so it also protects you from blind spots, from groupthink. And Kathleen spoke about that yesterday. I mean, there's so many business reasons.
You gave a great example about what?
So one of our big values at Microsoft is accessibility, right?
Yeah.
And so, in order to build, accessible software,
which is diversity,
technology, right? Which is building for a diverse audience, right?
Right.
We have to have people across the spectrum. Like, we need blind software developers to make software, create software and technology for blind people. Or visually impaired people, and that's just one example, of how we, have all these employees that are diverse so that we can build the best tech for the whole world.
And really that's where I think the big thing is when we're looking at that whole diversity, and are we including people, right? Giving them that equal playing field so that they can get involved and draw them in. Looking at that, like it can be simple disabilities. It could be the background that you came from. It can be a whole wide range of things, but we all bring different ways of seeing, of experiences, etc. And, you know, kind of following up on that whole, how that really affects accessibility. Something that we've had, and I show this all the time, and customers are like, what? I get called on a lot to do SharePoint stuff just because...
Because you're the SharePoint guy.
Because I've been doing...
And everything's built on SharePoint.
Everything's
Teams is built on SharePoint. So it's... Mike, you're like a gem.
But SharePoint, one of the out-of-the-box features that I show corporate comm, I'll say, you know, it's something you get out of the box, and I'll click. There's a little icon that you can click so that it takes any post out of the box, and it bloop, makes huge letters for the visually impaired, and there's the option to go click and it will read it to you.
Oh, I love that.
So
I read an article this morning while I was getting ready that had that option to listen, you know, to someone read it. It's so handy.
It's very handy. Not even just accessibility because of a, you know, an impairment, but yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
But we do that, and I think that's an important part. And so the two elements, like you were saying, of Insights and Glint, allow us to really query the workforce to find out, number one, you know, are we diverse in our inclusion of people within the workforce and within our development processes. But that goes without saying for any org, right? So if you're developing things for, you know, like we have medical device companies.
Right.
We have payers, insurance companies. How are people accessing those services and getting the things that they need from different backgrounds? Or are you groupthink?
Right.
One way, which then excludes a whole market share. And
then, yeah, totally. And then there's like succession planning and talent and skills planning ahead.
Succession planning.
Succession planning. That's a huge one.
The king is dead. Long live the king.
The queen.
The queen is dead. Long live the queen.
So, yeah, just so that you can make sure that you are tracking according to those plans. If you have plans for certain groups to be included in leadership at some point in the future, well, are they getting visibility? Are they getting time with, you know, senior leaders? Are groups being treated equitably and included in all of these things?
Or is it the little mojo club? We keep it all.
Right.
Which again... So we're not going to pick on their name, but earlier we were talking about an org, very large company that for many years was it.
Yep.
They were it. They're no longer it.
No.
And a lot of it had to do with
lack of diversity
and lack of, like you were saying, also bringing
perspectives, outside opinions.
And even grooming people, right? Because it was power. I want to hold my power. And so you had all that. And you know what it got me thinking of right now?
What? The
difference between, you know, you think about great empires from many years ago. So there was like groups like the Mongols with the Mongolian Empire. There was Alexander the Great. There was the Roman Empire and stuff. And the ones that lasted for long tenures did exactly like you said. They may have had power, but they had processes put into place to make sure they were pulling people in, grooming them on the hows and the whats, and they were doing things in a manner that perpetuated the empire / the company.
Wow.
The ones like Alexander the Great, probably the greatest conqueror, one of the greatest ever, right? Spread out all over. The second he died, fractured, and it was gone. Yeah. The empire, the Mongol Empire, after not Genghis, Kublai, his son, after Kublai Khan passed away.
So what's an example of one that lasted, that got it right?
The Romans lasted over 1,000 years because what did they do? They put into place systems and processes. The British, they've been ongoing forever. It's not, we always like to say England, but it's actually it's still the British Empire because they rule small. I mean, it's much smaller and condensed, but they've had things in place that has it transformed and changed over the years? Absolutely, right? We had the Magna Carta and all these things that transformed, but they had processes to continue that succession, right? Whereas you look at a lot of other places, again, without that, I mean, we're a great example. The United States, we put into process. Do we have our faults? Absolutely. Yeah. But there are, I mean, we all do, right? But we've put into place systems and processes to ensure that despite all the things that we've had, just like every country, throughout history, we're the longest running democratic form of government in world history.
Yeah, so we've got something right.
By a lot, right? Right?
Checks and balances.
Right? But the thing, it goes back, when we get back to what we're talking about, companies, I like that idea not only of, making sure you're diverse because it's just makes business sense, but it also affects your company's longevity, because if you're looking to grow, you're looking to be inclusive and bring people in, then you are developing the next round of leaders. You're not like the old Microsoft.
Right. Like we're in the tech world, we're a dinosaur. And we've completely,
transformed.
Satya in 2014, when Satya became our CEO, and Kathleen talked about that yesterday, about the work they did with, Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset, and how they really wanted to change our culture from a culture of know-it-alls to a culture of learn-it-alls based on a growth mindset approach. And we've done it. And it's, it's a continuous, it's just thinking about that continuous evolvement and improvement and testing and learning, and it's never fixed. So, it's, I was listening to the article I was talking about earlier that I listened to this morning. It talked about how people get stuck in these traps of thinking that, success is fixed, and versus thinking about that they're continuously evolving and growing and learning and kind of getting away from that, perfectionist thinking or that kind of, based in just in not understanding that it's you can literally learn anything. You can train it, learn it, and evolve. And so just treating yourself like that first, and also, that's how we work as an organization.
Organizationally. Yeah. And I think, I think back to like when I first started and they used to pitch the teams against each other, like competition. A good friend of mine, one of the people who was, helped bring me on board, I remember he went back to Redmond, this is back in the old days, and I flew out for a week-long thing I was out there, and we went out for dinner, and he told me, he was like, Mike, there's not a week that goes, and he was manager. He said, there was not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't go into my manager's office and pitch to them why they should have my job.
Wow, that's so scary.
Imagine that. But I mean, think about the way we've transformed, right? Because a lot of orgs have not. They're still into that.
Well, that company, that massive company you mentioned earlier, that was very much a part of their culture too. And
now they're not massive anymore.
No. So that's not a long-term strategy for success, and it also doesn't feel good. Like,
it doesn't
who wants to feel like that at work? I love going to work, and our managers have a great, like, we have the model coach care kind of leadership and guidance that our managers practice, and it's really, really helpful and supportive, and it does help build a culture of trust, and taking feedback and giving feedback and learning and growth mindset. So
growth mindset
feels a lot better to go to work.
It's cool.
Is your friend still at Microsoft?
He is not. No. He left back before the Satya, before all that.
You know, a lot of people have started coming back that left before. And they've, you know, there's someone on our team that, Noah Eisenberg, she's awesome. She's a GBB on our team that came back and really enjoys it. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, it has changed quite a bit, but I go back to, I'm just looking at our board up here, the whole idea of, again, how do you do that? So what we talk about when we talk about the employee, kind of bringing it back, is when you're looking at the employee experience, improving the employee experience so it benefits not only the employees, but the org, right? So that we're all improving and rising up. Viva Insights, the ability for managers to be able to get insight into their teams.
That's Viva Pulse. And then we didn't talk about that. So
bring that up.
Yeah. So Viva Pulse, and it's going to be coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
And it's a way for managers to do quick check-ins on their team. In fact, my manager, Kara, just used it recently.
Yeah.
She wanted to just kind of take a check and see how we're doing. And it was like 2 questions. And the questions are all like research and science-based questions, like they've been researched. And she selected a couple questions. And so it literally took like 3 minutes to respond. And it's anonymous. So our privacy is protected. But
just like Viva Insights.
Just like Viva Insights. Right? Yes, de-identified and it's aggregated. But she was able to check in and see how we're feeling, where it was like a week ago towards the end of the year. Just want to make sure y'all aren't overwhelmed and what you're feeling. And actually the response was they ended up moving we're going to have a kickoff for FY24 meeting this week that got pushed. And we got a quiet week of no meetings. And so I think that was in response to the Pulse. So it's a way that managers can just do a quick check-in and get that feedback right then, really quickly. And instead of having to wait until the employee pulse surveys come back that are more formal and incorporate everybody. So so that's coming soon to the suite.
Yeah.
And will be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I got access to it.
Did you?
Yeah, for some reason, work thinks I'm not a manager, but I have access to all these manager tools.
You manage
to pulse teams, and it's very simple to set up the Pulse, which I appreciated because I can pulse a group that I'm working with.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Maybe we can show that next time we meet with a customer. You can show them.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very cool, and it is stupid. I like to call things stupid simple.
Stupid simple. I think that's what you're going to say.
Where our minds are going, I like when it comes to that, I don't want to have to think too much, but I do want to know.
Yeah, and then there's an art to creating and a science to creating questions that aren't biased, that are going to lead to, giving you like candid and correct feedback.
Right.
And so those questions are available for managers in our Viva Pulse product.
Yeah. And so you pull all that together, and then you can improve not only your employees' experience, but if they're improved,
you're improved as a manager.
As a manager,
getting feedback.
As an org. And I think that's important, especially as we're moving forward. We're hitting, we're talking about AI a lot, which a lot of people, uncertain time. I mean, it's uncertain to people, right? And I totally get that. But the ability to keep tabs on your employees, because still an org is only as good as its employees.
Right. We are the org, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that does not go away. That still continues to be important.
Most important asset, your people.
Is your people. Yeah. So something to think about. So with that, we're not going to be around for a while.
Yeah, we're going on vacation.
Going on vacation. So I'm heading to Alaska, and you are?
I'm going to go see some concerts and ride my bike, and
So we're going to be off. We'll be coming back end of July So a couple of weeks that we'll be gone. But
catch our other podcasts. This is our 4th one.
And send suggestions.
Yeah.
I mean, I've gotten them. I didn't hit you today. I came close. But yeah, I mean, seriously, suggestions. You know, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. Yeah. On the blog itself, underneath, there's a comment section. But we would love to know, because when we come back, we're going to start booking guest speakers.
Guest speakers, yes. We have some good, exciting guest speakers, and yeah, that should be fun.
That'll be fun. But if you have people that you would like to see, please let us know, because or topics you'd like us to cover.
Well, great.
Well, great. So I guess that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
So from us to you, have a great rest of July. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Have a great weekend. Bye.